Good evening, everyone. The first thing on our agenda tonight are the public hearings that we have scheduled for this evening. The first public hearing that we are engaging in, the purpose of this public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public to provide input and comments regarding the proposed City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium 2014 through 2018 Annual Action Plan Amendment. Notice of this public hearing was faxed and or emailed to the media, emailed to various social service agencies and citizens, and or placed in the City of Urbana website on January 30th, 2020. I now declare this public hearing open. If anyone desires to express their views regarding the proposed Annual Action Plan Amendment, please come forward and be recognized. Your written comments are also welcome. Good evening. Would you please state your name for the record?
Good evening. My name is Tom Hodson, H-O-D-S-O-N. I'm president of the board of the directors of Homestead Corporation. I serve as a volunteer in that capacity. Your organization and the block grant funds have funded us, helped fund us in the past, and we've appreciated that very much, contributed to administrative expenses. And I'm not quite sure why that stopped. I have some ideas about how that came about as a result of lack of action by our executive director, and not any fault on your part. And I'm trying to pick up those pieces. We are in some ways on life support now. And just so that you're aware, Homestead operates Homestead Apartments on Grigg Street, providing housing for about 25 people who qualify for residence there as being homeless or near homeless. Near homeless is something like couch surfing. And a lot of our funding in the past came from participating in development projects, some of which were also funded through this organization. Financing of single-family homes for low-income individuals. We received a developer fee. We also received a developer fee for playing a role in Crystal View and Highland Green developments. Those sources of income have pretty much dried up for us, and that's one reason we can no longer afford an executive director. And as a volunteer, I'm probably spending 10 to 20 hours a week doing the books, paying the bills, and overseeing a property manager. And that's why I say we're sort of on life support. To be specific, my life. I'm not sure who else is going to do that. And I'm not going to live forever. I'm a retired attorney. So I'd like to get back in the process of being considered for contributions from your organization. We'd like to find a way to have a part-time employee doing many of the things that I'm doing now, so that we're a more sustainable operation. This year, our executive director sort of ate us alive in terms of we probably kept him longer than we should have and used up a lot of our resources, and then when he left, we found out a lot of things hadn't been done, which is we spent a lot of time cleaning up. So and it left us with maybe $50,000 in current liabilities that the board really wasn't kept up to date on, and $50,000 in a budget of somewhere around $120,000 or $150,000 a year, even at the reduced level, particularly at the reduced level we are now, is a pretty significant number. So I guess I may be too late for this year's process, but if there's a way that we can get reintegrated in, that would be helpful. I know you've been suffering from declining funds too, and that was one of the reasons our former executive director said we were no longer seeing funding from you. But with the recent article in the News Gazette, good news for everybody, and here I am.
So Tom, can I follow up just a little bit? The amendment that we're talking about tonight for this first one, is really to reallocate really old money into a future program. But I think your comments are really important for the next public hearing, so I'd like to include them there as well, because we are just now in our consolidated planning process, where the type of needs that you're talking about are very important for us to be aware of as we write our 5-year consolidated plan. And the types of program that you have are eligible for block grant funds, but as well as home funds. So if you wanted to do rehab, to the building, which I recently toured there with you, as you know, that's a kind of thing that could come from that pot of money too. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to put your comments under the public input for the consolidated plan, because I think that's probably more an appropriate place to put it.
Well, I'm certainly, that makes sense to me, and as I say, I
Yeah.
apologize for being here at the wrong time, but
No,
I'm an amateur at this process.
Right, and we welcome all input. We've been trying from a variety of ways, so I'm grateful you're here tonight. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Please.
Move that out of the way.
Good evening.
Hello.
Would you please state your name for the record, too?
Yes. My name is Robin Arbiter. I'm accompanied by Pasha. And I am also probably not going to answer the question that you are looking for an answer to tonight. But I came because I saw the invitation at Salt and Light to speak about what you love about Urbana. So I wanted to say some things that I love about Urbana and mention some things that I feel could use improvement and or investment.
So again, before you start, Robin, is it okay if I
Yes.
include your comments in the consolidated plan piece?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So among the things, here are some of the things I love about Urbana. I love that township is right downtown and that it's really up and functioning in the way that it's meant to, and that there's now a place where people who have nothing else can get a referral and have it be meaningful and helpful. It's really important. I love that we have a Salt and Light in Urbana, because there are very few organizations doing the kind of work on so many levels that it's doing. And when I heard the phrase addressing poverty with dignity, I sort of thought, oh, buzzwords, but I've been volunteering there a year and a half myself, and I really appreciate the really loving and sophisticated way that people address assisting people to get from sort of situations of crisis into situations of personal management. It's really lovely. And that community really needed, or that neighborhood really needed that resource, because there are very few meeting rooms and places for people to demonstrate their strengths in the same way that you can at Salt and Light. I really love Urbana's campus, the school campus, because in my years as a non-Urbanaite, who moved here, one of the things I've come to recognize is that people know each other a lot because they all went to Urbana High School. So, and it's a generational thing. So if you ask somebody, oh, did you know so-and-so, I think they're about your age, they really position themselves or can orient themselves in terms of the years they were at Urbana High School versus someone else's time. I mean, a lot of people's knowledge of one another in this small town are related to having gone to the same campus or having gone to school with siblings of people. And it's really neat, especially for someone who went to a high school of 3,000 people in a town with 10 plus high schools. We didn't know people like that. And I also love that we now have two spaces, like sort of city spaces, the downtown area and the Philo Road corridor, which have been revitalized to many extents. I mean, I remember when calling it a business corridor was a new thing out on Philo Road. And the most important aspect of it to me is that in both these places, people who don't have a lot of other resources, maybe who don't have cars, maybe who don't have a lot of income, can avoid sort of feeling stuck or alienated by just going out of their door and getting into places where there are built-in amenities, a park, benches, and where there are also secondhand stores and the Idea store and the Salt and Light and so forth, where people can get out and see their neighbors and just kind of enjoy things that are not costly with very little effort. So I really appreciate these parts of Urbana. Also the library. It's quite a treasure. And I'm going to add a plug for Homestead Corporation because we have just lost so many resources over the last 10 or 15 years that 30 years ago we were building up and were making such a difference. The detox and drug treatment and the beds that we had for people who were in need of shelter. I mean, so much disappeared. And Homestead has been, steady as a place that, as an affordable place for housing for people coming out of homelessness. And I was an AmeriCorps worker there in 97 to 99, maybe. And it's really meaningful to me that it's still there, and I still know some of the residents, and I know that they're really appreciative of it as well. So now for some areas of improvement. I've been working with a group for a year on transportation issues, and it's paratransit issues really. And so I feel that the city has a stake in this. Sometimes it's things like, well, we've been dealing really with mostly paratransit at county level and the MTD. But there are other issues that have come up in which I encounter regularly, and those include like the condition of sidewalks. Or this is going to sound really petty because compared to other things like putting your money toward housing interventions and things, it is maybe petty. But to get here today, I came up Illinois, and I wanted to come in the front door. But there's a really deep, big puddle there. And so I backed up, and I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to go all the way around the block. I'm going to go through the fire department sidewalk. But there's a kind of slightly less deep, but also really big puddle there. And that has an implication for me as a person riding on batteries. So, and with a dog who's, knee-high in water now. So that's a sidewalk that's still, functional. There are places around town where it's not. The water company comes in and uncovers a meter or gas or something, and then they don't replace the concrete that they have taken out of the sidewalk. So as a wheelchair user, I feel like I'm navigating an obstacle course all the time. I have to be mindful of where the sidewalk is missing 12 inches. There's a place down in front of it's the courthouse side of the bus stations downtown where there are bricks like out of the walkway, and I know Urbana loves its bricks. Okay, but let's just keep them in their place. So basically we've got these bricks torn up, and so if I want to navigate that, it's sort of like, what is it when you drive cross country, like those little four-wheelers? Okay, I'm too old for that. So there's the condition of the sidewalks is discouraging. And I know Green Street, I know we're promised these repairs and improvements, but it's not just Green Street. If you try to avoid the fact that I don't have a good memory, so I'll head down Green Street and I'll think, oh, look, there's a curb cut, I can get on the sidewalk. There's not a curb cut at the other end of the block, so I have to back up and look for, a driveway or something that's eroded enough that it's sort of like a curb cut. And it's like that on the parallel streets as well. So it's not like there's an easy fix for that. That condition is also not, it's also pretty common on some of the streets in Urbana off of, like, between Washington and Florida. So, and it's not just an issue, for me, also some of the issues which are aggravated by snow or actual rain, they don't minimize themselves right away after things, the storm ends, because when the drainage is such that mud stays pooled, or water and mud stay pooled on the sidewalk, then the next place I go, I'm bringing tires full of mud into that place. And honestly, it's embarrassing, and I'm making work for people. And mostly it's just really, it's including myself, and it's awkward. So I just wanted to bring that part of the transportation thing for me is getting myself someplace and the sidewalks needing attention. The other thing I wanted to mention is I lived for a long time in the Lehrman neighborhood, and I was an active organizer in the area. I lived there from 2001 to 2016. It's the longest I've ever lived in one place, and it really was my home. And during that time, the Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee did a variety of really wonderful programs. Sometimes we did summer arts. We had the garden, of course, at the corner. We did, there was a gentleman whom you probably know, Tommy Askins, who hosts the kids in his area for after-school homework support and things like that. So we get to know a lot of the children, even if we didn't have children ourselves in the neighborhood. And something that's really distressing me is watching kids who I know to be bright and capable and curious go from being active in our arts class and just a delight to be around to showing up in the mugshots in the paper. And I'm not a person with like a ton of answers for that, but I do believe that the solutions that we're going to need are going to have to encompass families as well as individuals. That we can't just try and fix a person or something, or and we have to sort of embrace an entire family and look at the strengths that families have. And I just feel like once the kids are being kind of publicly profiled, a lot of their strengths aren't visible, and they're certainly not getting them reflected back to them. And that goes back to a part that I think that you all play, which is looking at development that meets the needs of people who rent and don't have a lot of space. So there aren't in the Lehrman neighborhood, to the best of my knowledge still, there is not a meeting space, that the neighborhood can easily access. And this has been promised again and again by people who, were looking at buying properties as they went into foreclosure and so forth and so on. And, oh yes, you'll have a community room. Yes, maybe an outdoor pavilion. Yes, a ball diamond or this or that. And these things have not come to pass. So originally when we started organizing, we thought, we'll just do the community garden first, and then we want an indoor meeting space, and then we'd like some outdoor meeting space that could be multi-purpose kind of when the season allowed it. The Park District is doing a lovely partnership with LNAC and doing some family games and so forth on the garden site, but a lot of that other stuff that the neighborhood really needs, like a place to showcase the strengths of the community, as well as to address some of the needs for treatment or for kind of healing from trauma and other kinds of issues. We don't have that space in the neighborhood there. So I just wanted to make a plug for keeping in mind like the how the built environment could host some of what's needed in that particular neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And I don't know if you're going to stay, but we'll outline some of the neighborhood concerns that we've heard, and they're right in line with what you're mentioning, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would care to address the amendment issue? Seeing that there are no further comments, I now declare this public hearing closed. And from there, we will go to public hearing, our second one. Purpose of this public hearing, neighborhood meeting, is to provide an opportunity for the public to provide input and comments regarding the proposed City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium 2020 to 2024 Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2020-2021. Notice of this public hearing was faxed and or emailed to the media, emailed to various social service agencies and citizens, and or placed on the City of Urbana's website February 29th, 2020, and February 6, 2020 edition of the News Gazette. I now declare this public hearing open. If anyone desires to express their views regarding the proposed annual action plan, please come forward and be recognized. Your written comments are also welcome. And I would include, as mentioned before, that with their permission, Tom and Robin's comments will be added to this session, which is an even more appropriate place for them. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Thank you. Seeing that there are no further comments, I now declare the public hearing closed. And from there, we will go into our regularly scheduled Community Development Commission meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. If we could have the roll call, please.
Reverend Robert Freeman. Mr. Abdul-Hakim Samad. Mr. Mike Brown.
Here.
Mr. Castellano.
Here.
Ms. Anne Marie Silvas. Ms. Patty Jones.
Here.
Mr. Darius White.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. That would be the meeting from January 28th, 2020. If you would like to take just a minute to review those, and then I would entertain a motion for their approval.
I believe they were mailed to us, and so moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any other comment on those minutes from anyone? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is the public input portion of this meeting. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to bring some matter that is not on tonight's agenda to the attention of the commission, and this would be the time to do so? Seeing none, we will now move to presentation section, and that would be the staff report.
So thank you all for coming. We have been, since July of last year, working hard on our public input process for our consolidated plan. Our consolidated plan is required by the federal government to outline what the community sees as a high priority need, and then it addresses annually how we're going to allocate our funds. So it's a pretty important document to the City of Champaign, City of Urbana, and the Urbana Regional Planning Commission. It not only outlines our community development block grants funds, which we each of the communities receive their own, but we receive home funds, which are funded throughout that consortia-wide area. So we've been working hard on that. We will have a draft that will be released Friday afternoon. It says March 1st through March 31st is our comment period. But with March 1st being on a Sunday and Alyssa and I not wanting to come into work that day, you'll find it on our website. I would encourage you, in particular people like Robin, who's had a long history of community development in this area, to take a look at it, provide staff feedback. We really do want your input because we can't do this alone. We've started our process for the neighborhood cleanup that will be held in May of 2020. We're doing just one this year, and we'll keep you appraised of that as we go forward. We're doing monitoring and timeliness test of our CDBG funds, as well as our home-funded projects. Blight reduction program was closed a couple of years ago, but you're starting to see some redevelopment happen on those lots that were funded with that funding, that pot of money. And as a matter of fact, the first house that's was demolished and is being rebuilt is at 1114 West Church in Urbana, and it's a Habitat for Humanity home that the dedication is going to be Monday, March 2nd. So I hope you can all come to that dedication. I believe it is at 5:30. If I get a formal invitation, I'll forward it on to you guys. So, you know, we just continue to work on our main programs and closing things out. For those of you that don't know, Randy Burgett retired in the end of December of this year after many years of service to the city of Urbana. So we miss him, but wish him well. It's nice to see someone go into retirement healthy and happy. So, do you have anything else to add, Alyssa?
I do not.
Any questions on our staff report?
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda then, we have some unfinished business. First item of which is the amendment to the City of Urbana's fiscal year 2014 through 2018 action plans.
So HUD used to, at the end of each fiscal year, if we had funds left over in a program year grant, they would just roll them forward and we could reallocate them and spend them in the next year. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, they changed that process. So in 2014, if we said we were going to spend money on housing rehab and we didn't spend it all, that doesn't just automatically roll forward. We have to do this plan amendment and reallocate those funds to another project. And so this ordinance or this request tonight is really to clean up several years of little pots of money that's left hanging out there. And we're asking that we reallocate it to our neighborhood revitalization strategy budgeted line item. For several years, there have been funds set aside for, or discussed setting aside for the Kinch Street Lighting Project, and it has now become a high priority. The neighborhood's requested it. It's safety issues. There's, you know, police issues that show that by having better lighting, it'll make it a safer neighborhood. And so we are going to be asking to reallocate those funds, and we will put it towards the Kinch Street Lighting Project. Which I'm very excited about to see making a difference in that community. I think they've been promised this a long time, so it seems like a good use to use these extra pots of money to make that difference. Does anybody have any questions about the plan amendment?
So, do we usually pay for lighting in the city using CDBG funds?
It is, yeah, infrastructure improvements are an eligible expense. I think in the past, I think Chris mentioned this the last time, you have seen little bits of money, like I saw in looking at historical documents, that at one point $30,000 was set aside to do this project. Well, that's not nearly enough, and since we have this accumulated pots of money, it's an eligible expense. It's in a community development targeted area, which means more than 51% of the people that live there are low to moderate income. Then it seems like a good use of the funds. But infrastructure definitely is an eligible expense.
Do you have a sense of other lighting projects that have happened in the city, and if CDBG funds were used for those, or if there was another source of funding?
I do not. There may have been in the past, but I don't have that historical preference. I know that in this year's budget, money was set aside for sidewalk improvements, like Robin had mentioned with the ramps in Dr. Ellis subdivision, because there's a lot of seniors that are there. There's a lot of young families with children where those ramps make a big difference with strollers and wheelchairs and walkers. And so that has been in the 18-19 budget set aside. So
It's just my observation that it seems probable the city spends other sources of funds on neighborhoods that aren't target neighborhoods. But because this neighborhood is part of this target neighborhood, the city would like to not spend their money and instead use this other money and reallocate it for a project like that. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just good accounting. I'm not an accountant, but it's just an observation.
yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not sure it was that intentional, but I'm happy that we're able to make a difference, because we are limited where we can spend the funds. It has to be in a neighborhood that is benefits the low to moderate income neighborhoods. So.
Has there been discussion with an actual neighborhood to see if they want this
The Kent Street lighting, yes, they've been requesting it for 10 years, yeah,
for years?
yeah.
I would address that a little bit again, if I might. I think this is a great project to do because it's necessary. It's been necessary for a decade. I don't believe that there is any intentionality of using CDBG funds for it, but I think there is a difference between intentionality and what happens on a somewhat regular basis.
Okay,
Having been on this commission for getting close to 25 years,
wow,
there is a regularity in differences, I think, in how some of our target areas are treated. We have various areas in the city. The ones that apply to CDBG funds are considered blighted areas because the conditions and the state of that area is below that of other areas in the city. Now, there are things that are normal parts of maintenance of any city, and high on that list would be things like streets and sidewalks and lights, which one would assume should be done equally across the city for all areas. I think we have had an unfortunate pattern of using CDBG funds to do things that would otherwise have to be done out of general funds and are done out of general funds in all other areas. And while those are good projects, as this one is, that doesn't provide those CDBG funds for the purpose they were originally intended, which was to elevate that area, not seemingly merely to bring it up to a close to the same standard as the others. So, while I can't imagine a better use of these funds for this project, I think it would behoove us to find better uses for these kind of funds and do the routine maintenance for these target neighborhoods the same as we do it for everywhere else in the city. That's just my opinion.
sure.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Well, so this change was made in 2014, right? That you need to file a plan amendment in order to use the unspent funds.
Right.
You guys weren't here
No.
when that happened.
Nope.
Can you talk us through a little bit about why we're being asked to deal with all these funds right now as opposed to dealing with them in 2015, 16, 17, 18, and so on?
I cannot. I think you had very qualified staff. I'd worked with them for a number of years when I was at Champaign as well as Habitat. So I don't think it's, lack of qualified staff. I think it's just, as Alyssa and I know too, it's a lot of work for a very small staff. It's really critical that we move this forward now because there's a timeliness test done May 1st by HUD that at that point you can't carry forward more than 1.5 times your entitlement. So we have the risk right now of losing $250,000. And so as Alyssa and I were working on the consolidated plan and seeing these funds that were out there, we just had to make it a priority. And I don't think that level of priority was there in the past because they'd had other projects that had gone through. You know, Randy was here doing rehab projects, and so we weren't at that timeliness or commitment deadline, so it probably just didn't rise to that level of, not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't critical, I guess is a fair way to say it, because I know Kelly and Matt were very qualified, John before them was qualified, you know, it just, you're limited staffing and you hit the hot spots first.
Thank you.
I would say in prior staff's defense, one of the things that happens is you get in a habit of doing things, and for many years, when there was no requirement to utilize those funds, every year that you went into was with a little bit of not knowing what the next year's allocation would be.
That's still true.
And so some of that was, well, let's hang on to this small
For a rainy day.
bucket for a rainy day, exactly. And many times it served that purpose of
Right.
being able to fulfill a program that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise because the funding allocation was down.
Right.
Once you get kind of in that process, it's hard to get out of that process.
And that's very true. I don't know if you saw the article in the paper last week, but each president can submit their own budget forward, and this particular administration has zero funded the block grant, CDBG, HUD, Housing Authority programs have been zero. Thankfully, Congress recognizes the importance of all of those programs, and so they have given us the allocation. We got our allocation that you'll see in the 2021 budget that comes forward this weekend, and thankfully we got more, but it was 368 one year, this year it's 505. So there is a big fluctuation in how those funds come out, which sometimes makes it difficult to outlay the programs, like Chris said.
And it makes it more difficult now that you can't bank funds towards a big project
Right.
the same way you used to be able to. and
Right.
over a period of years, put them together. It
Right.
just can't be done the same way.
Home funds are a little more flexible, but block grant funds are not.
Yeah.
They want to see you using them to meet community needs, and if not, they take them out of your line of credit and are given back to the Congress.
Good. Any other questions? Or if not, we have three options. We can recommend the approval of this ordinance approving the amendment. We can recommend the approval of an ordinance with changes, or we can not recommend approval of the ordinance modification. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to forward the amendment on to the city with our approval, recommending they approve it.
Is there a second? Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And motion is approved to, we're recommending approval of the ordinance approving the City of Urbana CDBG amendment as written to council. All other discussion aside, it's still a good thing to do.
Thank you, staff, for doing that.
The second item on our agenda in unfinished business is setting the funding priorities for fiscal year 2021, 2020, and 2021, and a consolidated social services fund grant.
I'll just say real quick, I have grant applications due this Friday for Consolidated Social Service Fund. And then we will begin as a committee our individual reviews the first week of March, and then the second week of March, sit down as a committee and then make our recommendations of funding towards city council. So I just wanted to get funding priorities from CD Commission on how we'll use our $5,000 of community development block grant funds, how we will prioritize giving those funds out to an agency.
Last year's funds for the CDBG were allocated to Habitat for Humanity for a financial education program that they offer free to anyone in the community. And it's very well received and taken advantage of. And it's anything from pre-purchase, budgeting, one-on-one coaching, learning how to read your credit report. It's just some of those basic skills that some of us learned back in high school back in the day. That's just critical for making educated choices and decisions.
Was there success with their program last year?
Very much so.
Theirs is, in my opinion, a very good program and also non-denominational, which helps sometimes and gets in the way of true education.
As noted, this is $5,000, so this is not transformational funding for some big thing. This is
No,
correct, relatively
no.
small.
But it's very helpful, for an agency that they can leverage that money to get more money because it doesn't come with a lot of strings. So, if Habitat wanted to reach out to a foundation for funding, they could show that they had these dollars as they write which is why I really wanted to incorporate this process into the consolidated planning process so they know before July 1 what they're getting and they can reach out for those other dollars. And not just Habitat, but any organization.
Just point of clarification, that other agencies that may offer this service, have they been notified that those funds are available?
Talk about the process.
Yeah, so the process, I reached out, this is open to any nonprofit agency. And we will prioritize agencies that serve Urbana residents or focus on a fee-for-service model so they can serve anyone, but we're really focusing on who they serve in Urbana because it's Urbana taxpayer dollars. So we partner with the township, if just in case we forgot that part. But yeah, we partner with the township and share the funds. And then anyone can apply. I sent out notifications to agencies who attended the workshop last year. I'm part of various organizations that have a lot of different nonprofit agencies attend. So that'd be Human Service Council and Continuum of Care for Service Provider or Homeless Service Providers. I forget the name. CSPH is what it's shortened to. And I sent it to UBA and
Ministerial Alliance.
No, I was just,
yeah.
my
So
comment.
anyone can apply, and then it's, we focus on, it could be paths to employment, it could be youth services, it could be food, tangible benefits
I'm
to low
sorry.
income.
I think you misunderstood my question. I was raising why was Habitat being mentioned as, you just give an example.
I just wanted you to know what was funded last year.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
all.
That's what I was-
Because
okay.
the total pot of money that's available
Exactly.
is $180,000.
Right.
That $5,000 piece, you guys get to help set the priority for.
Gotcha.
So that's why we brought it to you.
I was sleeping somewhere, so I just need to make
Yeah,
sure.
no worries.
I don't want to cut you off.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's
No
what I was
worries.
asking.
Housing is another one.
Sure. So pretty much the same process that we used last year. You're using that process. And you were giving an example of what was used for that small amount of money. Gotcha. Okay. It takes me a while, but I'll get there.
So you guys can set the same priority if you want a different priority this year for those $5,000.
Yeah, I feel like the problems that existed last year, unfortunately, probably still exist. Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to hear some good news. I'm sure there's some out there. So I feel like the same priority seems like a reasonable approach.
So financial education.
I haven't seen any eradication notices coming out. I guess it does require a motion, yep, so we can give them something concrete to work with.
So I move that we continue our efforts in financial education.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue the financial education model. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And that is our recommendation. Good. Now we will move on to the new business section. First item there is the draft of the city of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium fiscal year 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan.
So as I explained earlier, the consolidated plan is a requirement by the federal government in order to us to do a formal application for our community development block grant and home funds, which is currently what we get. In the past, we've also gotten some emergency shelter grant funding, and that may be available again in the next 5 years, but this big document is required. We're required to do community input. We started in July of last year. We changed our process a little bit, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting. Typically, in the past, they would have 1 week of meetings, the first week of January, go out to neighborhoods to say they went to the targeted neighborhoods where people are. But unfortunately, last year was my first year experience with it, people didn't come. So we decided as we started this process this year that the city would go to where people currently meet. So we went to the Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee meeting at a library. We held meetings at Salt and Light. We went to the Ministerial Alliance. We went to Interfaith Group. We've done over 30 meetings. We actually went to Township on the day where people would be getting their checks, and Alyssa interviewed people there and asked them what they felt their needs were. So we've done a broad outlay of trying to get that community development input so that we can help identify needs. And we also did a survey online, and then when we went to community meetings, we had a paper survey that would help guide that discussion as well. We got over 130 responses to our survey, which was pretty darn good. The community development's high priority needs that were identified through this process so far is public facilities. There is a desperate need for funding to support infrastructure improvements, like Robin outlined, for lighting, drainage, roads, sidewalks in our low-income census tracts. Public services are necessary, funding to support programs for seniors, homeless, youth, after-school education opportunities, financial education, neighborhood cleanups, transitional housing are all identified needs as well. There is a cap on what we can spend that our allocation on, so it limits how much sometimes we'd like to give it all to the social service agencies, but we can't. This past year, we've identified some economic development opportunities. So funding to support programs or services that create economic opportunity and jobs in low and moderate income neighborhoods. So that may include improvements to small businesses that exist in our community development target areas, but they want to grow or do more outreach. We feel like that's important to focus that local small business in these neighborhoods. High priority housing needs that have been identified are affordable housing opportunities for low and moderate income houses. So as Tom mentioned, the single room occupancy, the SRO on Griggs, has a long history of home funding in it. We met with him recently to talk about ways that the cities could help. That's an eligible opportunity for that. Home money was used also for Crystal View and Highland Green. It's being used right now in Bristol Place. So, those larger affordable housing projects that have been developed in Champaign and Urbana over the past few years probably have some home funding in it. But home funds can also be used for rental assistance programs. They can be used for housing rehab, owner-occupied housing rehab programs to help keep people live in safe, decent housing. Many of our low-income families have gotten into the home, but to put a new roof on might be $8,000 or $10,000 that they just don't have the capacity to do that. And so that pot of money can be used for that. Another high need that is should be in the community, has been identified as reducing exposure to lead-based paint. Recently, there has been some state legislation that in the past, state of Illinois' allowable lead limits were much higher than what the CDC allows, and so recently that legislation was changed so that lead-based paint levels in children should not be above the CDC levels. And so funding to support education, testing, rehabilitation of housing with lead-based paint is pretty important. And then supporting the continuum of service providers to the homeless. There used to be two separate groups in the community, the continuum of care and the service providers to the homeless. They kind of had parallel scopes, and so 2 or 3 years ago, they combined, and they're one group now called the continuum of service providers to the homeless. They meet monthly. Alyssa sits on the executive committee that meets twice a month at Regional Plan Commission, but we try to identify needs to help homeless or near homeless people in the community. So whether that's discussions of maybe opening up a new shelter or working with CU at Home to make their shelter, their facility co-ed. So, women are at one end and men are at the other, which will happen in the fall of this year. But there's a variety of things that the city sits at the table and hopefully can play a role in. So those are some of the identified needs that we've had so far. We've just started, like I said, this public hearing, the 30-day comment period. So I encourage all of you to check our website. If you would like printed copies, the plan is about 250 pages. So I hope people are able to access it online, but I'm also happy to share it in printed version if you need us to. And also, we kind of looked at an average. In the past, we'd gotten about $475,000 in CDBG funding and $750,000 in home funding annually. So when you look at those 5-year goals, those numbers are literally 475,000 times 5 and 750,000 times 5. Each year when we get our annual allocation, that's the real dollars that we will allocate in our annual plan. But, for planning purposes, you kind of have to have a goal and a start point. And so we just kind of looked at the average of what we'd gotten over the past few years. Our FY 2021 allocation is $505,000 in CDBG funds, and then our home funds came out around $820,000. So we really don't expect any action tonight. We just really wanted to bring to you what we've heard from public input so far. We'll definitely incorporate Tom and Robin's comments into our public input that we've received so far. And then I just ask that you guys all, take an opportunity to look at it. We will hold a final public hearing here on March 24th at your next CD Commission meeting and bring you up to date on any other comments that we've heard, and then talk about funding more in depth at that point. So.
Next item, we do have a resolution approving the transfer of volume tax in connection with private activity.
So this is kind of it's not city money. The state of Illinois looks at each community's population, and they say for each person in your community, you can allocate $105 towards a community priority. So this comes up every year about this time. Typically, the cities have used set aside our bond cap authority to use for down payment programs and affordable housing developments. So when you hear about, Bristol, Crystal View, as well as Highland Green, all have Illinois Housing Development Authority money in them. Part of that came from ceding our bond cap authority to those groups. They've been very successful, both the Illinois Housing Development Authority and David Roush from, I can't remember his group, but have come forward and asked us to allocate money to their programs again. And we feel like because of the success rate, it's a good point for us to do. If we do nothing, which is a choice that we have, then our allocation amount, that $4+ million, will be given to the governor of the state of Illinois, and then he can decide what to do with those monies. But by us setting local priorities and ceding it to groups that have made investments in our community, we feel more of that local impact. Assist program.
That recommendation is to divide that 50/50 with the Any questions for staff on this? Okay, if not, we have our normal three options. We can forward this with our recommendation for approval. We can forward it with a recommendation to a modified recommendation, or we can, I guess it would be forwarded with a recommendation to do nothing and return it to the state would be the third option. So I will entertain a motion.
I move that we follow the staff recommendation to forward the resolution to the city council to allocate 50% to the, for the USS 2020 and the other half for the Illinois Housing Development Authority as shown here in the document.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is passed. We will forward this with a recommendation in accordance with the staff recommendation for a 50-50 allocation as we've done before.
I believe items B and C here should be one together, and they are not two separate. So it came with two memos, right?
Oh, okay.
But it's the same resolution?
Yeah. It
Okay.
came with two
Came
resolutions,
with
same
two-
memo.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And so B and C are one item.
B and C on the agenda are one item?
Am I correct or wrong on that?
I'm looking for the.
C is the ordinance for purchase of real estate,
Okay.
so I don't think it's the
It,
same.
it isn't, it's separate.
Okay.
That might be wrong. Mine is wrong.
Oh, okay, no
I'm
problem.
sorry. I'll take that back.
Not a problem. See, we just have more on the agenda than we usually do.
I know we do.
Excuse me.
We do.
I'm going to take that up with Ann sometime in the future.
That's right, that's right.
So item C on our agenda is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate, that being 1107 North Gregory Street.
So the city of Urbana gave money to Homestead Corporation to build a single-family home here when they were pretty active in doing development. They built this single-family home near King Park. It's a nice home, doing well. They transferred the ownership to Rosecrans, who was using it for affordable housing unit for people with, going through their behavioral mental health program. With the state funding cuts that happened a couple years ago, Rosecrans is shrinking their services back to their core services and no longer want to be in the real estate business. But because home money is in it, there's a 20-year affordability requirement, and so they can't really sell it on the open market because we wouldn't be able to recapture. We put in about $200,000 into building this project, and so if they couldn't recapture that, we would have to return the difference, the city would, to HUD. So to ensure that affordability, but yet to also respect Rosecrans and where they're at, we are asking that it be transferred back to the city, and then we will use it as a transitional housing unit till that affordability period runs out. We currently have two other transitional housing units. It's a successful program that we work with Courage Connection and the Housing Authority to help us find clients to live there. But again, it protects the intent of the funds and keeps us from having to pay money back.
Will adding that to their stock create any sort of cost burden on them for managing that?
Actually, no, it'll belong to the city of Urbana. It won't be transferred to them. They will just provide us with clients. So when
Okay, so
somebody
there's-
comes
so
through
it's no
their
different.
self-sufficiency program, they'll say, hey, the city of Urbana has this house if you're interested.
And they'll do the case management so that someone can be successful
Right.
and transfer out of homelessness.
Okay.
I'll take care of the case management.
Yes. Yeah.
And you may have said that, how long does that have to go on that affordability?
It's 20 years,
Right.
and I
How much-
think it was transferred in 2013 is when
I
it's.
was thinking it wasn't that
Yeah,
long ago.
2013.
Okay.
Yeah, that we've got a long ways to go,
You're right.
so.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion on what we should do on this project.
I move that we follow the recommendation to transfer this back to the city and have it be used as a transitional housing unit.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other comments? If not, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed? And it is approved to follow the staff recommendation to purchase the property for future development of affordable housing, or transfer the Okay. The last item on our agenda for tonight is a review of the bylaws.
So in your packet, I included our bylaws. Those have not had any changes, but I am proposing that we add a change that we can have electronic attendance. And there's a proposed language in your packet, and so tonight we won't make any decisions on that, but I wanted to present it, and then at our next meeting in March, we can make a decision if we want to allow for electronic attendance.
Could you summarize what you mean by electronic attendance?
So that would be like a Skype or a phone call in if you have a conflict, if you are sick, anything like that.
Just not on vacation.
Just not on vacation, correct?
And the electronic attendance does count towards quorum, correct?
Yes.
No,
No,
we have to
sorry.
Oh,
have
it doesn't.
quorum,
Okay, thank you.
but you would be in addition. So
Okay.
your voice would still be heard, which is important.
Got you, but okay.
Okay, thank you.
With the voice being heard aspect of that, will that be linked into our existing system so that people watching?
Yep,
City Council already does this.
right.
Okay.
So it's a setup system.
Yeah. Yeah, many of our boards and commissions, as they review their bylaws this year, they're adding this piece of it. And one of our commissioners has had some work commitments where it just has not allowed them to get here on time, but they still want to participate. So adding this piece will hopefully help that happen.
But just to be clear on that, we currently need a quorum of 5 to run a meeting, and we would still need a live quorum. 4. Or excuse me, 4. And we would still need the 4 members in live attendance at any given time.
Yes, that's correct.
And so then we'll make the decision next meeting as well. But, so you have the information, you can think about it, review it.
Excellent.
I would ask that any questions or clarifications you have to please email Alyssa, and then we can make sure to answer those and move forward with the bylaws at the next meeting.
Very good. That being the case, then, I would like to again thank those who participated in the public meetings and the meeting itself. It is always good to hear voices and see people. That being said, business is completed for this meeting, and it is adjourned.
Thank you.